My name is Christina McClellan, and I'm a woman at Iowa.
Chief Curator at the University of Iowa
Marin,
Museum of Art, and I'm a woman at Iowa.
Gigi Durham. I'm an associate professor in the School of Journalism, and I'm a woman at Iowa.
My name is Katherine Valde, and I'm a woman at Iowa.
Hello everyone, and welcome to another episode of Women at Iowa. My name is Katie Kuntz, and I'll be your host today. Women at Iowa is a television program promoting women at the University of Iowa who have done great things. We'd like to welcome our guest today, Katherine Valde. Katherine is a current undergraduate student at the University of Iowa, studying political science and history. Among other things, Katherine has been awarded the Presidential Scholar Award and has seen a shift in her passions toward politics and environmental sustainability. Welcome, Katherine, and thank you for joining us tonight.
Yes, thank you so much for having me.
Absolutely. I want to kind of let everyone get to know you a little bit, and I know that you're from Coralville, Iowa. Mm-hmm. Did you always know that you were going to attend the university? No,
not at all. I sort of thought that the University of Iowa would be the last place that I would find myself. Growing up in Iowa City, I kind of thought that I knew the town and I knew the university. It was really close to my high school. There's a lot of overlap between students who take classes at Iowa and go to school at West High. So I was looking elsewhere. I was almost sure that I was going to go to Georgetown University, actually, up until about 2 days before I had to send in my acceptance letter. And I was out in DC, and I was walking around the campus, and it wasn't for me. It wasn't a right fit, and I knew that I should go to Iowa.
What makes University of Iowa a good fit for you?
What I really like about Iowa is that it's a school and an atmosphere that rewards ambition. There are a lot of students here, and with a lot of students come a lot of resources. And I think that you don't have as many students maybe as who should be taking advantage of those resources. And so people who are self-motivated can really get to know some really interesting people and have some cool opportunities here at Iowa.
You mentioned that you grew up in the Iowa City area. Have you seen a change in the community since you've been a part of the university?
Yeah, I think being a student is a lot different than I ever thought it would be. A lot of the cultural and entertainment events that come with the university, I sort of had heard about and I knew, but I never really experienced. And so there are a lot of really cool lecturers that we bring to campus, and neat concerts, and just, even parts of the community in the university, like Prairie Lights, which is, a business, but going to readings, that wasn't ever something that was part of my high school experience. And I think that even though my parents, they just live 20 minutes away in Coralville, when I'm on campus, it feels like I could be in a different state.
Right. Do you think the university has any influence on your interest in politics?
Absolutely. Iowa is such a fertile ground for politics that it's hard to sort of ignore caucuses and campaigns growing up in Iowa. But being here at the university specifically, we've been lucky to have the president come to campus, not once, but twice, and one time while I've been here as a student. And it really heightens your awareness to politics. I think that it's really easy to get involved with local politics being here at the university. I know our university Democrats have a really strong relationship with our local elected officials, so that's been an easy gateway for me to get involved.
Certainly, and I've noticed, just looking over your resume, that you are certainly involved. You're the president of the University of Iowa Democrats, and I want to get this right, you're the political director of the College and Young Democrats,
yep,
and the second vice chair for the Johnson County Democrats. You've also interned for the Iowa Democratic Party in 2010. Mm-hmm. So what compels you to be such a passionate member for the Democratic Party?
Yeah, I first got involved in politics when I was back in high school. I spent the summer after my sophomore year and junior year working for Congressman Loebsack. I worked in his Iowa City office the summer of the floods, and that experience was pretty apolitical. A lot of it was constituent services, dealing with FEMA and bureaucratic organizations, so I didn't really get a flavor of what it's like to be in a campaign and to be, working with electeds, working on policy. So I didn't really know that I felt strongly as a Democrat back then. It was just sort of a government internship and an experience that I used to write essays about when I applied to college. But summer before I started at Iowa, I heard that there was a woman named Roxanne Conlon running for Senate, and I thought, hey, that's awesome. I know Iowa and Mississippi are the only two states in the U.S. that have never elected a woman to be either governor or in federal office, and that's ridiculous. So I was really excited to get started and help her out, and I didn't really know what I was signing up for when I went to my first meeting at the office, but I just started making phone calls, knocking doors, walking in some parades, pretty basic things. And it's just kind of, I've followed it and it's gotten me to where I am today. And I really identified strongly with the Democratic Party. The more that I worked in the party system, the more I got to know people. I think that the values of fairness and compassion are really what draw me to be a Democrat, and it's the party I think best represents those values.
Excellent. So you've worked with, obviously, Democrats on the state level, and you've also worked with students. Do you see any difference between the way students understand the election process compared to maybe while you were interning for Ms. Collins?
Yeah, well, I think students are kind of in a unique position. Students and retirees have kind of the most amount of time to give to campaigns. And with young people in particular, you know, campaign work is grueling. You work long nights, you know, you're out walking around, talking to people. It can be just physically exhausting. So I think that students are in sort of a special position to donate their time. You know, you're flexible, at least when you're in college, you can be pretty flexible with when you take classes and which blocks of time you leave open in the day. And I also think that young people in particular have sort of a special connection to politics because you haven't gone through a lot of elections. A lot of people tend to get jaded, might become more cynical, and they don't think that their vote counts and their work matters or is appreciated. And I don't run into that as much when I work with other students. I think we still sort of have a vibrancy and really believe that what the work we're doing can affect change.
Do you think that students across campus are really interested in the political process, or do you think that it's the students who seek out those things, like who work with you, that are really passionate about it, and then maybe others might be somewhat apathetic to it? Yeah,
probably the latter. Trying to register students to vote and talking about elections, especially the bulk of my work happened and revolved around midterm elections, which definitely aren't as glamorous as a presidential election. You know, when you have someone like Barack Obama at the top of your ticket, he can really speak and motivate young people. But when, you know, you're just talking about your local congressional election or even a Senate race, that doesn't really get people fired up. So I think it's easy for a lot of students to feel apathetic, and it takes a long time to get to know a system, know, you know, who your elected officials are in your area, feel like you sort of understand the framework that you're working in. And not everyone has time to become familiar with that. And so I think that's another reason why students, you know, you might vote, but that's kind of the limit of a lot of people's political participation. But, you know, the groups that we have in UDEMs and the people I see in college Republicans and even volunteers for, you know, Ron Paul's campaign, you know, once you get in, it just sort of breeds a culture. Your friends are in politics, you like to talk about it, and it feeds off of each other.
Great. As far as your work with the Democratic Party, what are the issues that keep you there?
Yeah, good question. The issues that are really near and dear to my heart as far as being a Democrat revolve around social issues. I'm really committed to equal rights and civil rights and social justice, which I guess all those words are kind of connected, but particularly education and environmental sustainability and housing are three things that really matter to me.
What do you mean by housing? I guess we don't hear that as an issue talked about on the national campaign that often. What would you say are the democratic values of housing, and how do you agree with those things?
Yeah, I guess my interest in housing stems, I worked on a research paper the spring semester of my freshman year researching post-war housing in the Iowa City area. And so when I talk about housing, I mean, you know, affordable housing, fair housing, housing that's available to everyone. I used to do a lot of work with Habitat for Humanity when I was in high school, and just kind of seeing the impact that owning a home and having a space that you can be proud of really facilitates work in other areas. You know, if you feel comfortable inviting friends back to your house, that improves how you'll do in school. If people can afford housing and, you know, have a place to live, I just think that it bleeds into a lot of other issues.
Do you see that as a local issue or a state issue? Is it a federal issue? What do you think?
I think it's all three. in housing in Iowa City, a lot of times people talk about relationships between landlords and tenants and having housing that's affordable to people. I know that's kind of something that gets brought up a lot locally, but just on a national level, I think that housing can be unaffordable.
Absolutely. And you also mentioned education is an important issue to you. What do you mean by that? Like, are you thinking kindergarten through 12th grade? Are you thinking secondary education? All of it?
Yeah, all of it. Right now, what I know the most about and I talk the most about is public higher education. Being at the University of Iowa, we've seen our tuition increase the last couple of years as state appropriations have decreased. That's something that, I've gone to Des Moines and I've worked to sort of advocate on behalf of the University of Iowa and student government. So that's sort of what I know the most about.
Right. You're a member of the University of Iowa Student Government. You're the Government Relations Liaison.
Yep.
So tell us a little bit about your duties as the liaison.
Yeah, so I guess in the fall semester before the Iowa General Assembly doesn't meet until January every year. So the fall, we've kind of, what I've done last year and done this year is mostly election awareness. We had city council elections, so registering people to vote, talking about forums, and then this year obviously we have a presidential election in November, so I'll be doing a lot of get out the vote stuff, but probably the bulk of my work falls in spring semester. I try to go down to Des Moines once a week or once every 2 weeks and bring some students with me and just meet with legislators and discuss kind of the value of the University of Iowa. And there are a lot of things, I think there's a disconnect between what we do on campus and what gets discussed at the state level. It's really easy for people's perceptions of the university to just sort of be football, pretty much athletics, and just sort of a culture of maybe inflated salaries, and it's hard to understand how the research that we produce here really impacts Iowans all across the state. So I sort of try to bring my message of why I chose to come to the University of Iowa and what I like best about the school to the state.
You actually wrote a column to the Daily Iowan mentioning that you think it's really important to see past the headlines and see the little things that are done on campus, and those are what makes the biggest effect. Can you explain that a little bit?
Yeah, I think that there are tons and tons of student orgs on campus that are doing really neat things. One of my favorite events of the year is called Walk It Out, and it's a multicultural fashion show. And last year, they raised money for HIV awareness and research. Dance marathon, a lot of people hear about, but, just discussing the fact that students are doing neat things to make a positive impact, not only on campus, but in their other communities, the homes that they're from in Iowa, and that, we're multi-dimensional people. We don't just go to Iowa and study, or we don't just come to Iowa and play football, that there are a lot of small accomplishments and things happening on at the university that, are reasons we should continue to receive funding so that students can afford to come here and get a 4-year education.
So when you go to Des Moines and you're lobbying, are these things you bring up to our legislators?
Yeah, absolutely. At the end of last year, we had a couple of big lobby days. Like I said, I go individually, but I also try to bring as many people with me as possible because, the more voices you have, the easier it is that you'll be heard. So we had a Hawkeye Caucus day, which was just students from the University of Iowa. And, we just sort of meet with our local legislators. My, legislator is Dave Jacoby from Coralville, but we have people from all over Iowa who can talk to their representatives. And I think it's easier to connect when you're from the same place. And we just sort of talked about, what we're studying and just thanked our legislators for supporting the university. And then we did the same thing on a little bit bigger scale a couple days later with Iowa State and UNI, and just bringing students down and sort of putting a face to the university so that it's not just kind of a big institution, but it's a lot of individual students and students from your hometown, your neighbors.
Right. So I think lobbying maybe is a little misunderstood in the general public. Obviously, you don't have boatloads of money when you go to the, the state house. How do you get received? How are you received when you're there? Generally,
very well. Lobbying can sometimes sound corporate, and we're just a couple of students advocating is really what we're doing. But yeah, every time I've been there, everyone, my discussions have been polite and cordial, and I think that representatives are generally pleased to see students, taking the time, making the sacrifice of maybe missing a class or driving down to the Capitol to get this message across.
You also wrote something for the Press Citizen, like in late April, I think, mentioning that you took a group of students to Des Moines and that it wasn't very well received. And it seemed like from that, you got together with some people and started to make something called Universities for a Better Iowa. Can you tell us a little bit more about that program?
Yeah, Universities for a Better Iowa is sort of a group started by students at the University of Iowa, Iowa State University, and UNI, and it's supported by our Board of Regents. And we had a big kickoff event at April of last year, and we had Governor Branstad and Lieutenant Governor Reynolds come and speak, and it's just sort of a way to frame Iowa's public institutions and to discuss the value, how does the research produced at Iowa, how does the business extension at Iowa State matter and reach, your average Iowan in Mason City or in Carroll, Iowa, who probably don't think about the region institutions on a daily basis except for, when it's football season and you see the Iowa State game. But it was started at the November of last year. We wanted to go and have some town hall meetings and sort of discuss these accomplishments in the hometowns and in parts of western Iowa and northern Iowa where we are pretty far disconnected from the university. Right.
Well, obviously you're a student, so your education matters, but why do you think it's so important for the rest of Iowa? Other than us providing research for them, why should students care? Why should students be lobbying for their tuition and things like that?
Yeah. Well, I think, education is the #1 way to upward social mobility. That is the most important thing that we can do for the next generation. And for me and for my friends, I think it's important that we can find affordable, quality higher education without drowning ourselves in student loans and taking out big debts that'll really, kind of change the course of our careers afterwards. You might have to take a different job rather than go get a graduate degree or kind of tweak your interests in order to make yourself more marketable. And I think it's important that students continue to have a quality, affordable educations like public schools in Iowa. And Iowa just has a really rich history of, public education from preschool to the universities. And, I'm concerned when I see funds cut to education.
Right. Well, you're the government relations liaison. What about other students? How can they, maybe if they're not able to go with you to a trip, how can they talk to their senators or legislators or representatives? Yeah,
it really is a citizens legislature. I think sometimes it can be intimidating for students to reach out to their local legislator, but it shouldn't be. I would encourage people to just send emails. You can find everyone's information on the Iowa Legislative website, and just shoot a quick email that introduces yourself, say your major, what you're studying, what your favorite thing about the University of Iowa is, and then just thank that person for continuing to support the university and hope that they continue to do so in the future. I think that's kind of the easiest thing you can do. It just takes a couple minutes to send an email. But beyond that, I would, ask people to come with me to Des Moines. We buy big charter buses and have people, we try to make it really easy for students to go to Des Moines when we have these larger lobby days. So anyone, who is interested can look for kind of information about that in the spring. Otherwise, writing op-eds to your local papers, I think, is another good way to sort of send this message. But yeah, the easiest thing is just send an email and introduce yourself.
Now, you've also gotten to go to Washington, D.C., is that correct?
Yes.
What did you do in Washington, D.C.?
I went, I think it was in early October of last year with the president and vice president of student government, and we went out for the Hawkeye Caucus. The biggest thing that we did there was just kind of building relationships. We had a function for the Congressman Loebsack to come out and other representatives of Iowa and local alumni in the DC area to just sort of get together and build relationships and set kind of a structure for us to go back and continue to market the university and to talk about what we're doing on campus.
And you think it was a successful experience?
I think it was good. Yeah, we made a lot of connections that we kept throughout the year. And I know we saw, like the issue of Pell Grants is a federal one, and that came up a lot, and student loans when the issue of Stafford loans became really big when we had President Obama on campus last April. I definitely think that the relationships that we made out in DC were beneficial to understanding some of these bigger issues we faced.
Great. And then you also mentioned that environmental sustainability is a big issue for you. This summer you were a participant in the Summer of Solutions.
Yeah.
Tell us a little bit about your involvement in Summer of Solutions.
Absolutely. So Summer of Solutions, I got involved last summer, but the Iowa City Summer of Solutions group has only been around for 3 summers. We're a local environmental nonprofit, and we're part of a larger group. Our umbrella group is called Grand Aspirations, which was just started up by a couple of students at McAllister College up in the St. Paul area about 4 years back. And the idea behind it is that you have a lot of students, you go and you're at a campus or a university for 4 years, and it's easy not to get involved, not to kind of grow your roots in a place, and to just go home for the summer and only come back and think about school. But what we try to do is get people to stay, get to know their communities, and work to make a positive difference. So what we did this summer, we had 3 different projects going on. One, you managed a bunch of different local gardens and worked on community gardens and talking about eating locally and sustainable food. The second thing we did was we worked with the local Habitat for Humanity and did weatherization for different homes. We canvassed some homes and found a list of people who are interested in making small changes like changing your faucet head and installing low flush toilets and caulking your windows. And then the third project, which is the one that I helped to run, was a sustainable art initiative. And the biggest thing that we did, I think, was we worked with about 4 different summer camps for 6 weeks. So around 1,000 kids in total that we worked with. And we brought different crafts for them to do. And we'd never used any new materials. We found things that we repurposed from city carton recycling, like plastic bags, old books. We made wind chimes out of old silverware and keys that people had lost and put in a lost and found at West High School. And just kind of, while doing that, also talking about environmental education. But those are the 3 projects that Iowa City Summer Solutions worked on.
And that's great. Tell us a little bit more about the gardens. What kind of things did the gardens produce and who was involved in that sort of thing? Yeah,
we had about, I would say 20 participants with our program this year, which was great. It's the most number of people that we've ever had. It's just grown every summer. And at the gardens, we worked on gardens that were existing and usually managed by the city Parks and Rec department, but they weren't able to kind of tend to them every week and weed them and water them, especially this summer with the drought. It was really important to have people out there watering, and we grew things like tomatoes and lots of kale. And the biggest thing that we tried to do was to get residents from the areas in the communities around these gardens into the gardens to see what's growing, to have them take ownership of them. We did a couple of activities called the farmer fairs, where we worked with kids and just sort of talked about what grows and what's seasonal and how you can cook with different foods and eat differently. But those were sort of the big things that the garden did.
That's excellent. And what about the refurbishing your homes? Is that something that anyone can do, or do you think you need people like you to come to your door to door and?
Oh gosh, no. If I can do it, then it's something that literally anyone can do. I'm not handy, but yeah, I went to a workshop where I learned how to caulk windows and just kind of change like your little sink faucet. And they're really small changes, but they're cost saving, which I think was the most effective selling point. When we tried to, you show up at someone's door and you knock and you say, "Hi, I'm Katherine from Summer Solutions. Would you like to make some energy efficiency improvements?" People kind of look at you, what? But then if you just say, "Oh, would you like, I have some free CFL light bulbs and you can save money on your electricity bill," then people open their door and let you in. And sometimes people are kind of suspicious because they don't think that you can really get something for nothing. But, we had grants from Mid-American and student government, and we were able to kind of make these small changes that they were cheap for us to provide, and I think they save residents, a sizable chunk of money in the long run.
Great. And then obviously you mentioned that you were the kind of helping chair the arts project, is that right?
Yeah.
Why was that so important to you?
It was really neat for me to think about kind of what Iowa City needs and how I can facilitate Iowa City's needs. Like I was saying, you know, we're part of a national organization, and some of the programs of Summer Solutions are in Detroit and Hartford, Connecticut, and those are cities that have really different needs than Iowa City. I think a lot of people would probably think that we're a pretty sustainable and environmentally friendly city as it is. And so thinking about how I could kind of bring culture and put a different spin on what people usually think is the environmental movement, and reaching, a younger audience, reaching kids and educating them through a craft that's fun, was something that was really cool to kind of conceptualize in the beginning of the year and then see the project through. We had an art showcase this last Saturday that was sort of the culmination of our whole project, and the three things that we did this summer for our project, like I mentioned, we worked with children at local summer camps and, kind of reinvented what kind of crafts you can do, and that was fun. But we also reached out to local artists and we had them make pieces. The theme of our display was called Time for Sustainability, so a lot of people used clocks, and everyone kind of they created their works out of repurposed, recycled materials, and then we were able to showcase both these professional art pieces and the children's crafts, and then kind of have some displays about what our project did over the summer. And we had it at the new Eastside Recycling Center out on Scott Boulevard, which is a really, really cool space. And we probably had about 75 people come, and a lot of people who hadn't heard of Summer Solutions. So it was fun to sort of explain this project and show what we did with kids. We had a lot of photos, and I think people are generally excited to hear about what the project was.
That's great. These are, small time projects that people can do maybe any day. Do you think that, like, the national politics, are they ignoring these kind of things when they focus on maybe the bigger picture with windmills and solar energy and things like that, or do you think they're both important? Yeah,
I think they're both really important. A lot of these, things like changing what you eat on a day-to-day basis, thinking about, what you could throw away versus what you might be able to save and repurpose and to make into something new and beautiful. I don't see that becoming policy anytime soon, because there are bigger things that kind of rise to the forefront of public discourse before these small things. But I think it's important for just everyday citizens to think about these decisions that you make, and they're small, but I'm a really big believer that a lot of small decisions can add up to a big change. And so I think that it's important to kind of have both the policy and the grassroots movement.
You mentioned the things that you eat. How does that affect the environment, what we're eating?
Yeah. So one thing that's kind of recent to me, and I know it's been in the news a lot lately, is thinking about meat consumption, and the amount of meat that people eat has a bigger environmental impact than kind of any of your other day-to-day decisions. So one thing that I like to talk about is Meatless Mondays, and just giving up meat on Monday and thinking about cooking other meals. You think about new vegetables and how to make different dishes, and it's fun to stretch yourself like that. But yeah, personal choices about what you eat, where your food comes from, buying organic, eating locally, sustainably produced food that comes, farmers have a fair price for your food, but particularly skipping out and eating less meat can be one of the biggest changes that someone can make for their carbon footprint.
Wow. So, as a political activist, what are some of the policy changes you're looking for in terms of environmental sustainability?
Yeah, I definitely think that there should be a greater push towards renewable energy. I think that we need to be looking more into wind and solar and geothermal, particularly when we look at kind of the industrial agricultural complex, that, producing a lot of corn and a lot of beans maybe isn't the best thing to do. If you make a lot of corn, that goes into corn syrup, and then you see that we subsidize junk foods rather than investing in vegetables and a diverse selection of crops. I think that kind of our food policy can be taken in a more healthy and sustainable direction.
As the government liaisons, with the UISG, have you had the opportunity to lobby about any of those issues, or are you pretty much focused on education?
No, my work with student government is pretty centered around education, but in my own life and my own letters and relationships with legislators, food policy and environmental policy are kind of issues that are close to my heart.
Absolutely. Well, Katherine, one thing that we like to do is ask our guests to suggest a book or anything else that kind of explains their positions. Is there anything you'd like to suggest?
Sure. I read a really great book this summer. It's called The Righteous Mind, Why Good People Are Divided by Religion and Politics by Jonathan Haidt. And it was a really interesting read. It kind of talks about values and difference in values between conservative and liberal thinkers. He also has a really great TED Talk. If anyone checks it out, it's about 20 minutes and pretty much sums up the book. But that was a really interesting read for me this summer.
Excellent. Well, thank you very much. And thank you for watching another episode of Women at Iowa.